This tutorial will cover Spring Cloud Netflix Hystrix, the fault tolerance library. We will use the library and implement the circuit breaker enterprise pattern, which is describing a strategy against failure cascading at different levels in application. It is generally required to enable fault tolerance in the application where some underlying service is down or throwing error permanently. We need to fall back to different path of program execution automatically. This is related to distributed computing style of ecosystem using lots of underlying microservices. This is where circuit breaker pattern helps, and Hystrix is a tool to build this circuit breaker. If service 1 fails, then all other services will fail too. Additional risk is that service 2 and 4 will keep sending requests to service 1, so it will be completely overloaded and will never be able to recover. The circuit breaker pattern addresses this problem. Just like an electrical switch, when closed electrons can flow through it, when open the flow is stopped. Hystrix can wrap methods with circuit breaker that uses the following 5 logic. 1. By default the circuit is closed and the original method is executed. 2. The original method throws an exception, the fallback is executed. 3. Error rate hits the threshold, the circuit opens. 4. Until the circuit is open the original method is not executed anymore, only the fallback. 5. After a predefined amount of time the circuit is closed, and the flow starts from the beginning. To demo circuit breaker, we will create following 2 microservices where first is dependent on another. Employee microservice is basic REST-based service on employee entity. We will call this service from employee consumer service to understand circuit breaker. Second is employee consumer microservice, again a simple REST-based microservice where we will implement circuit breaker using Hystrix. Employee service will be invoked from here and we will test the fallback path once employee service will be unavailable. We have one REST controller class called employee service controller and expose one REST endpoint for getting all the employee details for a particular school. Here we are exposing get employee by department endpoint to serve the business purpose. For simplicity, we are hard-coding the employee details. Here is the employee entity class. I have already started the employee service and it is running on port 8098. Server port number is mentioned in application properties file. Now let's hit the employee service endpoint to get the employees of QA and Dev department. This is Hystrix-enabled employee consumer service. It has following Spring Boot starter dependencies. First, web, REST endpoints. Second, actuator, providing basic management URL. Third, Hystrix, enable circuit breaker. Fourth, Hystrix dashboard, enable one dashboard screen related to the circuit breaker monitoring. Notice Spring Hystrix employee service consumer application class has with Spring Boot application enable Hystrix dashboard and enable circuit breaker annotations. And expose the employee endpoints. We will do the following things here to enable Hystrix circuit breaker on the delegate class. Invoke employee service through Spring Framework provided REST template. Add Hystrix command to enable fallback method with Hystrix command annotation with fallback method name. This means that we will have to add another method fallback call employee service and get data with same signature, which will be invoked when actual employee service will be down. This fallback method will simply return some default value. The second method getEmployee will initially fail because of new runtime exception simulating downstream system failure, but after a few calls it will fail because the circuit is open. By convention the fallback method has the same signature as the method it belongs to. Additionally, it can take a throwable parameter so it can process the exception occurred in the original method. I have already started the Spring Hystrix employee service
Now
consumer
we already know
application
that
and it
employee
running
Hystrix
on. Service is calling employee service internally, and it is getting employee details from that service. So if both the services are running, employee service is displaying the data returned by employee service as we have seen in the employee service browser output above. This is circuit
The
closed employee
state.
will fail of new runtime exception and it's processing the exception occurred in the original method. This is Hystrix stream window and it is a continuous stream that Hystrix generates. It is just a health check result along with all the service calls that are being monitored by Hystrix. Sample output will look like in browser. Now we will open the visual dashboard and this is the initial state. Now add Hystrix stream URL in dashboard to get a meaningful dynamic visual representation of the circuit being monitored by the Hystrix component. Visual dashboard after providing the stream input in the home page. Now let us stop the employee service and test the employee consumer service again from browser. This time it will return the fallback method response. Here Hystrix comes into picture. It monitors employee service in frequent interval and as it is down, Hystrix component has opened the circuit and fallback path enabled.